Hello, hello. Welcome back to Tiny Little Victories. I am your host, Jennifer Kite-Powell, and today we don't have an intro, a fun teaser intro from our guest because I decided not to do it today. How about that? We are just going to skip right into the guest today and talk a little bit about your civil liberties online. Yeah, that is a thing. And we're going to talk to Hayley Tsukayama, and she is a senior legislative activist at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I'm going to put all this in the notes because the Electronic Frontier Foundation is a nonprofit that is 100% out there trying to defend your digital privacy, free speech, and innovation. And you may think, what's that got to do with me, innovation? A lot. If you think about artificial intelligence, you think about ad tech, not ag tech. It's kind of agriculture on the brain lately. Advertising technology, which kind of tracks and lurks in everything you do and then repositions you to focus your eyeballs on ads when you're reading the news or stories that kind of look like news and they're not news, and they take you down a rabbit hole where there's a guy with corn on his toes. I mean, think about all the disruptions you have when you're reading the news. And South Park did a very, very funny spoof on this, but it's real. It's real that news is being corrupted by ad technology. And I mean, I would just love to personally read the news online and not see a million stories pop up that kind of look like news, but they're really just advertising pieces. So the Electronic Frontier Foundation works for you at a state level, a federal level, and obviously they try to tie into global regulation, but to try to ensure that your local governments are doing the best they possibly can to make sure that your civil liberties, your digital privacy are protected online. Oh, they have so many great things. They have a Deep Links blog. They have a very killer podcast, and they do it in a way that's very engaging, very compelling, very relatable. So don't think that it's all going to be a bunch of people shaking their fingers. It's not. It's really deep thinkers, people that have walked all parts of life. And that is where Hayley comes in. Hayley was a Washington Post technology correspondent before she became a senior legislative activist at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. So she talks a little bit about that different mindset when you're reporting on things. She covered technology, some policy, gadgets, controversy and trends. And she talks about that shift. You know, when you're a journalist, you have to sort of be objective. You can't take a personal side of things. I, as you know, am a senior Forbes contributor, and it is difficult to be able to ride that line, and you have to look at all sides of the story. And then she switched when she went to the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and she found a little different kind of voice inside of her. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're also going to talk about your civil liberties online. We're going to talk about what local governments are doing, what they're not doing, what you can do. And I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation because a lot of the things she talks about are things that you might take for granted every day, that you know are out there, but you don't know how to tackle it. So, you know, we spend most of our time online clicking everything, opening everything, and we just don't really think about how that impacts our data, which is the only commodity that we have these days. So I really know that you're going to enjoy this episode with Hayley Tsukayama on Tiny Little Victories. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Tiny Little Victories. Today, I am talking to Hayley Tsukayama. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Tsukayama.
Tsukayama. I forgot the S.
Yeah,
I'm so
it's
sorry.
very easy to do.
Very easy to do. Hayley Tsukayama, and she is a senior legislative activist for the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And welcome, Hayley. I'm so excited that you're here with us on the show to talk about these very important issues.
Well, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, I'm going to give you a little send up to everybody. You were a Washington Post tech reporter. You covered like consumer technology, like splishes and splashes of policy. And you also won the 2010 recipient, you were a 2010 recipient of the White House Correspondent Association Missouri Fellowship Award. Is that correct?
That's right.
Wow. I mean, that's just like tech journalism royalty, in my opinion. And now you made this jump over to the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Why? How did you get there from this world of tech journalism? I mean, it kind of makes sense, but what was your path that took you there?
Yeah, so I mean, in some ways, like, no one was more surprised than me. I mean, I think, you could tell from my background, I was like very focused on the journalism thing, right? Like, I went to
Yeah.
Missouri Journalism School, which is a fantastic journalism school for anybody who might be looking
Yeah, and you went
out
to
there.
Vassar too. Sorry, I forgot to throw that out. You went to Vassar as well. So sorry, like top of the food chain.
And I was like, did school paper. I did like internships even in high school on newspapers. I used to like fax a weekly newsletter to my grandparents when I was a kid. Like, journalism was like all I wanted to do.
Oh my God. What were you faxing to your grandparents? I love that you use the word fax
Well,
and
it was a
newsletter and
fax.
grandparents in the same sentence.
Yeah, it was, we called it the Tsukayama Weekly. I like forced my sister to write it with me. I think she's
Oh
4
my
years
God, I
older than
love
me
this.
and very
Yeah.
obliging. And we would just like, tell them what we were up to that week.
I
We'd
love
use like
that.
clip art, lay it out.
Oh yeah, of course, clip art. You have to have clip art because it wasn't anything
Obviously.
else then at the time. Okay. And I love that you did this for them. What was their, just, out of curiosity, what was their reply? Did they love it, or is it like something they look forward? Did they subscribe?
Definitely should have charged a subscription fee. So
Yeah, totally.
I grew up in Minnesota. My grandparents were in Hawaii. They're actually in, my grandfather used to work on the American military base in Okinawa. So we
Oh.
used to, we just didn't get to talk that often just because of time zones or
Yeah.
whatever. And even when he retired and they moved to Hawaii to Minnesota is still a pretty big time zone difference.
Yeah.
So we used to just send them these newsletters, and normally we'd only get to talk on
Love
the
it.
weekends. And of course, like, long distance calling was more expensive then. It was a different world.
Oh my God, totally. You're just like, you're really in the Wayback Machine today, right?
That's
Like
right.
long distance calling, faxing newsletters to your grandparents. I love it. So how long ago is that? Let's date it, because we're talking we are talking not that long ago, but it seems so foreign to even be bringing this up.
I know. It is funny to think about. So it must have been like 92, 93. I was born in 86.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
It must have been, 92, 93, because you were very high tech then. Yeah, that's pretty high tech, right? Like,
well,
clip art and a newsletter.
Yeah, my dad loves tech himself, which I'm sure
Yeah.
informs sort of my path. And then,
Yeah.
like Word Perfect or whatever it was,
Yeah.
had a newsletter template. So why not?
Yeah. And it's new. You know what? Sorry. It was new technology then.
Oh yeah, I felt very cool.
Yeah, new technology, and like probably zero privacy issues at that point in time, right? Like, just wow. I didn't expect to go down this path, but this is why we do this podcast, so we can go down this path.
Totally.
Okay. So it's in your blood. Journalism is in your blood, and here
Yes.
you are, like, starting with this newsletter, forcing your sister to write, and you went to Vassar, you went to Missouri Journalism School, and here you are, Washington Post. Then what happened?
So, it was, I mean, it felt really much like I had lucked into a dream job right off the bat. I mean, I'd worked very hard for it, but of course, it's networking and luck and it's timing and everything. And those were great years at the Post, right? I spent almost 8 years there. 2010 to 2018, which is like quite an interesting time in tech. You really saw the
100%.
the rise of social media and Facebook and Twitter. People very dismissive of Twitter, like, oh, it's just what people ate for breakfast. Like, what is?
Oh, yes. Oh my God. Yeah, exactly.
And then Arab Spring. And then sort of. So it was a really interesting time to cover tech. I really enjoyed it. I got to do, the Post had gone through a round of buyouts at that time. So it was really just two of us functionally in the tech section. Cecilia Kong, who's now at the New York Times, and I. And I had started like as a temp, really. I mean, as a contractor, as a part-time contractor, and then became a full-time contractor, and then a staff writer. So like the world was my oyster. I could kind of cover whatever I wanted. So I did some product reviews, I did policy, I did business reporting, and really got to kind of develop and cover tech at this really interesting time in its growth. But towards the end of my time at the Post, I was getting really frustrated because it was, so I guess to backtrack a little, the way I got interested in sort of tech reporting and tech policy reporting is when I was an intern in my second year of grad school in Washington, D.C. at my hometown paper, the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. We were covering the healthcare debate, the Obamacare debate, which was a fascinating, area to cover.
Yeah.
And I got to learn about HIPAA, of all things, the Health Information.
Oh my God.
Portability and accountability.
See, there's always a path. There's always a path.
That's right.
To something.
And I got really fascinated by this idea that, HIPAA is a health privacy law, but it really only covers like data that is produced by like hospitals or your doctor or your insurance. If you have that same data and you give it to, I don't know, Google, it's not protected by HIPAA because Google isn't what they call a HIPAA covered entity. It doesn't have to abide by the health privacy law. And I found that really fascinating, especially, as I continued covering and we saw the rise of like Fitbits and fitness trackers and all of that kind of stuff. And so that's how I got into the tech policy, because I was really seeing this interesting, apart from just being a big nerd, like I was also seeing this really interesting.
Nerds are so cool though. Yeah.
I mean, now they are, or cooler anyway.
Yeah. I think they were always cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. I did actually not know that about that same data from HIPAA that isn't covered under Google, and then the convergence of, you're right, that quantified self movement and all of that Apple data, all of those. The Fitbit, it was the Fitbit started it all, really.
Yeah.
Did that alarm you? Were you just like interested as a journalist, or did it start to like seep into you thinking about all of your personal data out there?
I think in the beginning it was more interesting, right? It was like almost not academic, but like it was just like, oh, this is a really interesting trend. It seems like, DC paper, right? So it's like, it seems like policymakers are going to have to pay attention to this. It seems like they're going to have to make rules for this. Like, to me, it brings up really interesting questions of like, how do you make rules for technology that is rapidly changing? So like,
Yeah, totally.
Legislation and regulation is by design sort of deliberative, and technology is just like, I mean, they say, right, move fast and break things. That was like Facebook's thing for a long time.
And they broke it.
Yeah, right. So it was interesting to see those two things collide, and so I just found that really interesting. I think as I started to cover more, so this gets into how I got into activism, right? So
what was your later years? This is starting to lead to your trigger.
Exactly. Later years at the Post, Target breach, Equifax, Cambridge Analytica, right? All these things.
Wow.
And the Post's tech section is housed in the business section. So I'd be writing about privacy breaches and all these things that were happening and all this data that was leaking and what they were doing with it and, all this stuff. And then every quarter I'd be like, and they had their best earnings ever.
Oh, God.
Right? Because that was just at that time, that's what was happening. And I found that really, really frustrating. And I found myself, as a journalist, you're really supposed to be objective as you can be. You're really supposed to like take a very like interested but sort of dispassionate like look
Yes, I
at the
think that's a great
situation.
way. Yeah, it's hard. I still write for Forbes, and I find that some pitches that come across, I do the same thing. Like, just keep it neutral. Keep it neutral.
Yeah.
Don't it keep your personal feelings out of that story.
Yeah.
It's
And
hard.
I was finding it harder and harder. And I was like,
Mm.
someone ought to do something. Like somebody's got to do something. Who is doing something? Um, and of course, through tech reporting, EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, where I work
Yeah.
now, has been a digital rights nonprofit since 1990, since I was sending those faxes to my grandparents. And so
since you were sending those faxes around, right?
That's right. And so I got to talk to them a lot over the course of reporting, just to get a read on what they were saying and really get immersed in the issues. And so I was sort of feeling this weird frustration with where I was in my career, just in terms of like how I felt about the issues that I was covering, and like, was I able to do that job the way that it should be done, or was I wanting to do something else? And then on Twitter, I saw this posting for legislative activist at EFF, and I reached out to the press director, who's the person I had the best relationship, and I was like, "Is this something I should apply for? Like, is that totally off base?" So we had lunch, and I applied, and I was very lucky. Yeah, I mean, they were happy.
Well, I mean, it's smart to hire. Like, this is a really beautiful story, because in a way, when you're starting to work like you were, like you became armed with knowledge and information. You're connecting these pieces. You're reporting dispassionately, but I loved your analogy of like, hey, it's all these tech breaches at the same time. They had their most profitable year ever. I would think that like having somebody with your brain and that viewpoint is a perfect addition to the Electronic Frontier Foundation, because you are able to sort of see like both sides of everything.
I mean, I certainly like it here. I do feel like I fit in here, so I was very happy when they when they took a chance on me.
Yeah.
And then it was really funny because I went from having to be really careful about what opinions I put out there to like having opinions for a living, which is like very,
oh my God,
very freeing in some ways.
Totally. It's so opposite of how you've been living your life in a way.
Right. Yeah. So now, I've been here 4.5 years. And I basically, I kind of project manage our state legislative work. So we do work across the country. We do federal and state work, but state is really kind of where my heart is.
Local, more like at that local level. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What is that like for you? What is a day like for you then? I mean, because I don't think people really understand, and we're going to really plug the Electronic Frontier Foundation through this whole thing and in the notes, but what do consumers not know about what EFF is doing for people, and how does your job like play out every day? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because there's no real like typical day, but generally speaking, so EFF covers a lot of issues related to digital civil liberties. So privacy being one, that's kind of the one that's like closest to my heart. If you made me pick from my children, privacy is the one that I like the best. But we also do a lot of work kind of like promoting and protecting innovation. So we have a whole intellectual property arm. We work on right to repair work, which I think is really important. Just being able to say that, how like we used to just buy software, or we used to buy devices, and then we had them, and then we'd have to subscribe. That's changed a lot.
That's so true. That is so true. You're really, and this is the kind of thing that I don't think people think of holistically, right? You're right. We used to just buy devices and didn't have to think about anything else. And now I don't think we do even think about subscribing. We click everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
people are just clicking like crazy.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm sure you'll get into this, but $3 a month for that. Like, sure, whatever.
No problem. $1. Sure. Why not? And it adds up. But also I was thinking about those policies that the phones or everybody makes you sign, like we have to agree to all our policies, and it's a really long list of things that people just want to click through to get to the app or to get to the phone. And at one point in time, I think I was taking a trip to Africa and we were having this conversation. It was traveling with National Geographic. And we had this whole conversation about, has anybody actually read the entire, terms, all the way down to the bottom. And I was like, no, this is like a 21-hour flight. So maybe I'll do that. So I actually read like the terms. I have an Android all the way. It took a lot. I had a flight. So it was like perfect time to sit there. Got all the way, I think you probably know better than I do, down to the end. There's this tiny section about health.
Mm-hmm.
And it was saying, hey, I'm summarizing, like basically, if in the future, maybe you might possibly, could be a possibility that you could get cancer, like we're not responsible, basically. Like, don't put the phone within 3 inches of your mouth or an ear or a vital organ. And I'm like, wait, what? It's all the way down. And I think of all the things people are just, your point of like, just to buy something and walk away. And now you're literally signing away everything and you're not even reading it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's bonkers to me.
Yeah. I mean, so I think just the consumer relationship has changed a lot, right, with companies. So that's, we want to make sure EFF is dedicated to like making sure that the civil liberties you have offline, speech, expression, privacy, like you can, ideally you can walk down the street and not be tracked, although we can get into that too. That's a lot of EFF work as well. But follow you online, right? So as we move digital, as we go increasingly online, like we just really want to protect that. So
I like that. Civil liberties offline, the same thing you have online. That's right. A really great way to put that. Yeah.
So,
and do you think people are aware of that, or do you think they just assume that someone's going to look after them?
I mean, I think people, I think some people are aware of it, and it's just it's been such a series of incremental changes that you kind of get used to it, or you kind of say, I mean, terms and conditions is a perfect example, right? Where you're kind of like, okay, like this is really inconvenient. I have some concerns, but also like at the end of the day, I need a phone. So like, I'm just gonna hit accept. And so I think a lot of people are, it's like sort of a low level background concern, and maybe it like, comes up every once in a while. And if you ask people, are you concerned about your privacy? Often they will say yes, even if they don't necessarily, even if they don't have a specific example, right? It's just like, I just feel like I should be concerned about my privacy.
Yeah. I feel an obligation to be concerned about it, but
but it's overwhelming, right? Because it's every...
Yeah, it is.
It's every device. It's like more devices every year, right? I mean, when I used to go to CES as a tech reporter, the Consumer Electronics show, it's like, oh, okay, now my toothbrush has terms and conditions. Now my scale has terms and conditions. It's like, how many...
Oh my God, yes. Your refrigerator.
Exactly. It's like, how many things can we put chips in?
It's so true. It's so true. And, I think even like at that one time at CES, they were covering what was the whole Fitbit, the health craze, but then they were having bracelets and rings that were supposed to like help you understand your mood. And their terms and conditions for that, like all that data, it does. Actually, I don't have a low level background concern. I'd say I'd have a medium level background concern, but I don't know how to, I guess it's higher, but I don't know how to fix it, right? Like I don't, short of turning off all your devices, or how do I protect my online, civil liberties? I don't know, because I don't feel like I don't think big companies care too much, to be honest. That's you maybe can't say it, but I'm going to say it. It's a perfect analogy that tech breaches, but they had their best earnings ever. And I do feel that it's very much like that today. Twitter is a hot mess right now. Just like, I don't trust that anything that I say or do, my privacy there is at all protected. And yet I'm still there.
Right. Well, and so this is the thing, right? Where it's like, these tools have become so important to our daily lives. Like, I mean, sure, we could give up Twitter, you know, like whatever, but it's like, it's a way to have conversations. It's a way to, you know, be involved in the discussions that you want to be involved in, or was. I make no speculations about the future of Twitter, but but it all comes at this cost. And I think, I mean, you know, I do often get asked, like, what should I do individually? And it's a really hard question to answer, because I think the true reason is, you know, these companies, I mean, I don't like to characterize them as evil, because I just think that's like not productive normally, but they are.
No, it's not. It's not.
Yeah. But like they are incentivized to pursue profit. They're incentivized to, you know, to deliver shareholder value. And they are not incentivized to protect privacy, because there aren't regulations. So to me, it's like, there are, of course, things you can do on an individual level, but I really, don't think you should have to, because it's a right, privacy. And B, like,
you shouldn't have to, but you should not. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. Keep going. B.
No. But and B, I was just gonna say, it's systemic, right? So that's why I really look at regulation and legislation as a way to say, like, you know, I mean, I'm not saying we have to over-regulate things, but just to say, like, look, there are some basic ground rules about data that you should be following, just to like readjust the incentives, right? At least you have to balance, like, what are you doing to your customers? What effects is your data collection and use having on your customers? At least balance that with profit.
Exactly. So. I love that because, you know, I almost feel like it's a runaway train. Like you said, it's systemic, but when Facebook and when all of the rise of these social apps, when you were, you know, covering the social media rise during your journalism time, it was a runaway train, because everyone, oh my God, we can talk to Bob in Peoria, and we're so connected, and there was no restraint. And I think, like your point about, you know, the companies, they just created something, and that they knew that there would be privacy issues, but they just didn't. I don't feel like they wanted to think about it, because we were so excited. It's like feeding baby sugar, right? It's like, yum, it's delicious. And now we're just sort of addicted in a way. And now I feel like we're trying to go back and fix the things that probably should have been, you know, embedded in the beginning. And I think it is hard to change behavior. And I think it is hard to go backwards in a way. And that's a lot of this, you know, chat GPT AI stuff, from people like, hey, maybe we should just like stop for a second and think before we run down the street with scissors. Right. And I still think you see a lot of that like runaway train effect happening. And I really love your comment about regulation and legislation and basic ground rules. It's so simplistic, and yet, like, how did we miss that? Like, just seem to be avoided, ignored when all this was starting. I mean, and that is a little evil. I think it is a little evil, because you knew they know. You knew they know. They knew. You know they knew. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think your analogy about like feeding sugar to a baby is like exactly right. Like it felt good, right? I mean, like, and it is very, I mean, there are things that are very exciting, right? Like as I said, like I live far away from my family. I live, you know, it's like great to be able to communicate with them and all these tools. So I'm not saying there's no value there. I think you're absolutely right as well, that when it started, you know, now there's this idea of like privacy by design. I mean, which is an old idea, but, you know, like do privacy by design, like build it in from the beginning. I think, you know, privacy often was a thing that fell by the wayside when you're like, because it's not sexy, it's not like, and plus it doesn't make you want to keep
totally, because sugar is a consumer selling point. Like, we are those little rats in the cage hitting that pellet, like waiting for that sugar to come out or whatever they put in the pellet. It's not sexy, it doesn't sell.
So I think, you know, if you're a startup and you're on a lean budget and you're like, okay, where am I going to put my energy? It's like growth is like all you want, right? So I think
and that's that push from that shareholder focus and venture capitalists who just want to buy. I think it is a bypass, like just like a pulmonary bypass, right? Just get out there, get the numbers. And I think that makes the whole system a little broken. I interviewed a guy who is president of Freedom Internet in the Netherlands, and he talks about like having a company that's mission impacted, that where the shareholders aren't driving what's happening to the company. It's very interesting creating what he's been talking about. He talks a lot about what you're talking about, regulation and legislation and building it in, not being beholden to shareholders, but yet balancing that with capitalism at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is really again, it's like having to go backwards in time and like build that in from the beginning. And that's not how we've built companies and businesses.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I don't know. It's like I've tried to think of a lot of analogies, and like, I don't come necessarily from an activist background, so I've like tried to look at other movements that I think are similar. And like, cars didn't used to have seatbelts, right? So like that's kind of how I try to think about it. Yeah. It's like, we put this thing, like we all got, became a part of our daily lives. We realized, there may be some guardrails we should put on it. And then like we added seatbelts. So like, let's just add some seatbelts.
I love that. Let's just add some seatbelts to this whole thing. That's all we're saying. We're not trying to, And I think a lot of people aren't aware, I mean, I think everyone wears a seatbelt today. Maybe you don't, maybe you sneak it off once you get in your car. But, I have a lot of people, I'm not on Facebook anymore or Instagram, and everyone's like, how do you live without it? I'm like, how do you live on it? Like, literally, do you know what's happening with everything you do? And they're like, yeah, I don't care. Because the benefit outweighs for them what they feel they're giving away. If you could like Black Mirror, to people that show about, how we take data and it could influence how you walk around in the world and you could physically see it. Maybe people would, because you can't really see it, right? Mm-hmm. It's not something you can put your hands around. It's not tangible like your phone or an app or, a TikTok video, but it's there. It's like lurking in the background.
Right. Yeah. Like if you are writing your phone number down and you see a guy like peeking over your shoulder and like, writing it down behind you, that's
exactly.
That's like a very real visceral thing, but you just don't think about it.
And I was reading on your website where there was a very electronic in the EFF Foundation website, and there was a really interesting featured update about how cops are incorporating private cameras into the real-time surveillance networks. Mm-hmm. And I did want to bring that up because it was interesting the way the story was written, where it said that people are buying and promoting these products from Fusus in order to, like a company, in order to like get access to on-demand live video. And I guess it made me think about how this, I guess individual, I'll just take it on myself, right? I'll put this data or this onto my front Ring camera, or I'll put it on my street, or I'll put it in my business, and I'll just become my own like sheriff in town on privacy. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering like how much of that citizen, how dangerous is that in a way for these companies to be selling things like this that literally anybody could buy, that's really all about surveillance?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, that's a really great question, right?
Because, sorry, okay.
No, it's like, because sorry, I
made you sigh. Sorry.
Let me just collect my thoughts.
Yeah, of course.
It is obviously very concerning, right? Like, I don't want people who have Ring cameras to feel bad about having them. That's sort of like where my hesitation comes from, because like, again, right? Like you bought a thing, like probably someone's stealing your packages. You want to know, like, there's like a very tangible personal benefit to you to do it. And then you don't really think about like, oh, Amazon can turn this over to the police, right? Like it could feed into racial profiling. It could feed into, maybe down the line, like facial recognition. It could feed into all these things. Yeah. And so it is another, I don't know, to me, it's like another instance of like where the way that the companies are set up, like doesn't allow individuals to really make those decisions for themselves, right? It's like, or to like honestly balance them, right? Like to have all the facts so that you can like decide what you're doing. It also weirdly gets into like competition issues because of course Ring is an Amazon company, and so like they can like market, and they can do these, right? They can sort of do whatever they want. Like there are probably more privacy protective versions of these products on, out there, but they don't have the reach, they don't have the scale, they don't, it's
yes.
So
if they don't have the marketing behind them, and I think that I don't have a ring. I purposely chose not to get one I told you I was a mid-level, like, concerned person. And I walk down my own street and I'm like, oh my God, like if I stand in front of your house and just stand there, right? Oh, you have really pretty flowers today, or there's a bumblebee bumbling around. Like everything I'm doing is captured on that camera.
Yeah.
And it may look like I'm stalking, but I'm not. I'm just admiring the flora and the fauna. But I had some neighbors tell me that they had, before I lived here, that they had like somebody that was just wandering around the neighborhood, somebody on drugs, and just sort of like haphazardly, like trying to open car doors or just mischief making, but sort of dazed mischief making. And I guess they couldn't catch him long enough, but they had pieced together every single Ring camera. Some neighbor had taken all of this footage, collated it, and pieced together this journey all the way down the street. And I was like, I can't. Like, that's frightening to me. What are we going to do about this type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, that is really scary. Like, that is really scary. I mean, and that's like, this is the other thing for me about privacy, right? To me, it's a lot about like expectations, right? Like, and like, so you would never, ever expect walking down a street that someone could do that, right?
Right.
Like, just not in our, in our social expectations, like handbook. I don't know how to say it, but it's like just not a thing you would
I like that. Yeah.
Not a thing you would ever think about. And so, and again, like people aren't thinking about that when they buy the product either. And like, it's like, I guess now they should, but like, it's not a thing that you ever consider, I think, when you're buying one of those cameras. So, I mean,
yeah,
yes, yeah. No, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. I did do that a lot. I gotta keep my mouth shut.
Oh, no. It's good to bounce off each other.
Yeah. I'm so excited. It's such a great conversation. That's why I have to like settle down, Jennifer. Just settle down.
So, for us as well, right? It's again like, yes, individuals can be thinking about and like should have choices and should have full information when they're buying products, but it really is like, we're calling on companies like, don't share this information with police. We're calling on legislators to say like, don't let law enforcement buy this information. Like, that kind of footage has like a real impact on people. And of course, I'm like a kind looking Asian lady, but like if I would feel much differently, I think, about, or, you hear from people who are like young Black men, right? Like we've seen a lot of shootings of communities that are treated very differently by law enforcement are really the ones who are putting their hands up and saying like, this is super concerning. And I think we all have to listen to that and lift that up and think about that, because they are definitely the ones who are bearing the brunt of this sort of thing.
I 100%. I mean, I think people go, oh, we have to watch out for racial profiling. I'm like, too late, because it is so frightening to me. And I think that you're right, that there are populations that are marginalized by that and judged by that. And, the person that was walking down the street in this video, I didn't live here then. Somebody kept it and showed it to me. And he was white as a white man's cape. Right. And it was interesting because I thought, well, they didn't seem that alarmed, but if his skin was a different color, would they have been alarmed? And I think that is 100% what worries me about data collection, data privacy. Like it is it going to protect everyone equally? And when you talked about, civil rights offline, God, I can't believe you have to say that, and civil rights, civil liberties online, I think that is where we have to be very careful, even more vigilant, in fact, because, there's no human element in that. It's very more cut or dry. I think you got a lot of gray area, maybe, I don't know, when you're offline, but I don't know what to do. I don't have any, I'm sure I guess we'll segue to this then. you're doing work with state legislators. Are you finding them to be like open, or they don't know what to do? Or I don't want you to give away too much, but I mean, I would think starting at state is going to help a lot more people or bring much more awareness than maybe federal. I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah. I mean, I will tell you everything.
Okay. Oh, right. I love it. We're never getting off. We are never giving off this podcast. This is great.
Right,
okay.
Right. So a couple things, right? I think, just again, referencing my like time as a reporter, we've also seen a shift in like legislator, state and federal, like attitude towards tech, like a very marked shift, right? I think when I was starting, it was like, tech is the engine of the American economy. Like, we can't hinder it. We have to tech companies were very effective, and maybe rightly, but they were very effective at saying like, you don't understand what you're messing with. So like, let us self-regulate. We'll figure it out. Like, just let us be. We're good. And I think over time, that argument does not fly anymore, right? And I think the way that we've seen that way that that's played out specifically in the privacy space is like, it used to be tech companies would say, under no circumstances should we have a privacy law. Like, it should just be, let us govern data use and collection as we see fit by industry. We'll set up industry standards and stuff like that. And now we're seeing tech companies say, okay, yes, we support privacy laws, and then they want to write them so that they're the most favorable to them.
The arrogance, really, honestly, like, yeah.
But
let us write them. Sure, go right ahead.
But even that's a shift, right? That's them recognizing like, oh, people care about this enough that like, we have to give in on, okay, we need privacy laws, and then they just want to shape them. So I think lawmakers are, what I see, and obviously it varies, like it's hard to issue a blanket statement, but I generally do see, legislators are people, so they definitely see all the same trends that you and I see in our daily lives, right? And they're trying to figure out how to balance it. I think I do find people are more open to these conversations, or they understand at least the issues that we're raising better, right? They can relate it to something in their own lives. And so, we have seen a lot.
That's great news.
Yeah. So we have seen a lot of privacy bills. Of course, like, money and lobbying is still a thing. So, of the several states,
that's just a whole nother battle right there. Lobbying, like, you could just go. You have to have alcohol to have that conversation, though. It blows my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. It always comes back to money. So of the several states that have passed privacy laws, in the past several years, most of them are not super strong privacy laws. Okay. California's is probably the strongest. There's still improvements I'd like to see, because I think for consumers it's not super easy to use. And I won't get too into the weeds on that. But a lot of other states have taken a much more like, oh, let's balance interests and consumer interests kind of approach to laws.
Which states?
So Virginia was sort of the first to take that more, what I would call like a moderate or outright business friendly approach. They were the first to pass it into law. Utah passed, I would say, an even business friendlier version. And then, this year we've seen a lot of, I don't even have like all the states rattle off in my head, but Indiana, Iowa, Florida have all passed, some privacy laws. So like, in some ways it's okay. They're giving people some privacy rights.
Yeah.
It's just like not as many as I would like to see. And like, are they willing to them? I don't know. Right. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And also, like, what's it going to take? Because again, I come back to, are they not doing it because they're not aware it hasn't impacted them yet? Or are they still more business friendly? Because until it is good to hear that some states are doing it, but that's a small number of states, right? In terms of all the states that we have. And the time frame for that is, I would hope to see that we'd see more of that happening the more you see a lot of this concern over AI and ChatGPT and rights and data rights and data privacy. But you get, just to say this as a consumer, and this is like, it's like you're my therapist here, but I get so many text messages or emails. Oh, we had a data breach. Sorry. Oops. Data, big mobile phone companies, I'll say at T-Mobile half the time, every 6 months or so, I'm like, sorry, you're a subset of people whose data was breached. I'm like, well, what do I need to do about it? Like, where do I need to go? How do I stop this? How do you guys stop this, please?
Right.
And then there's nowhere to go. It's like a deep, dark, it's a rabbit hole as a consumer. And I don't know where to go to maybe I should go to the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Maybe that's how I should take action, because it feels like you can't fix it, right? I don't know of any privacy as a voter. I don't know who to ask. Hey, you got some privacy laws for consumers on the books? And, I don't know. I feel like it's outside of my control.
Yeah.
Other than me, I don't know what I can do. What can we do? You said that people ask you and you're like, I don't know. I mean, actually, how about the question is, what should we be more concerned about? And is there a way to make our voice heard? Oh my God, I can't believe I asked you that.
Why?
So big. Because it's such a huge, like, what can we do? But what will we do? Yeah. We're such junkies. We're just junkies.
Yeah. I mean, so again, right, this comes down to like I firmly believe that the onus should not be on individuals because it's just too big. Like, and that's a problem I have with like California's law, right? Is that to file requests, you as an individual are supposed to ask companies, okay, do you have information on me? Can you delete it? And then you're supposed to go to like every single company. So
yeah,
which is like, I mean, I'm a professional privacy advocate and I do not.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a lot. That's a lot. And we are literally down to a 9-second extension span. If we can't click something and have it open up a window or we can return our package to Banana Republic, we are not going to do it.
That's right. So, I mean, there are some folks who are building like tools, like, like a browser plugin where you could say, like you set it and forget it, right? Where it's like, this is telling everybody that I'm like trying to opt out of stuff. So like to the extent that
I would love that.
Yeah. So like if you can, it's called the global opt out. So plugin. So you can look for that. So that's one thing, right? I mean, it's like hard for me because it all feels a little drop in the buckety and like at the end of the day, like the thing you should be doing is like yelling at your representatives to like address.
Yeah,
issues.
I mean, literally, you are so right. That should be something that we should be screaming about collectively. That should be something that we care about with our locally elected officials. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I think certainly on things like surveillance, right? So like you were talking about cameras or like like how police departments interact with those kinds of companies, like that is very local. Like actually some of our best advocacy has happened at the city level, right? Not even at the state level, but like at the city level.
Interesting.
Because obviously the smaller entity that you're dealing with, the fewer people will tip the balance, right? So it's like if we send 3 people to a city council meeting, that feels like a lot. If you send 200 messages to a state senate office, or I mean depending on your state, right? But like whatever, like that gets attention. Like Congress, they got like hundreds of thousands.
I mean, forget it.
Yeah.
Forget it.
So while I don't want to encourage like disengaging with the federal government, I do think like when you're thinking about if these are issues that really matter to you, like you can start small, and in some ways starting small can be more impactful because
I agree, Hayley. I agree with you 100%. I used to be a very like, let's go big. When I first started, I worked for a U.S. Senator in Washington, Senator Sam Nunn, and I was all about those big ticket items, right? Let's move the needle this way. And now, many years later, decades later, I am all about local politics, 100% local politics. Like you go to a city council meeting, there's a lot happening there. And I do feel like your voice is more heard and you can get on an agenda. You can make people care. There's a guy I moved to a really, sadly, after leaving Europe, I ended up in Texas. Okay, it's beautiful here, but Texas is a hot mess. And there's a guy that's like a local council here who literally walks around, knocks on your door, like, and has a chat with you. I mean, like, he really listens. And you go to the meeting and he's like, "Hey, Mary, thanks. Remember when we talked on your doorstep about blah, blah, blah?" Like, he hears you. And I think that level of hearing is what we need right now, especially when you're talking about digital privacy, because it is so intangible and we are so instant gratification forward now that it has to stay elevated. It has to stay in the conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
And does EFF do work on that really local level, or is it staying at the state and federal level?
I mean, it really depends. You know, we're about 100 people, so we're not like tiny, but we're not.
Oh my gosh!
Either.
Yeah.
So a lot of it, you know, we work with grassroots groups across the country who are like interested in our issues. We have something called the Electric Frontier Alliance. So it's they're not.
Oh yeah, I know them. They're great.
Yeah, so like we don't control them. You know, it's not like they're like local branches, but it's like any grassroots organization who has similar interests with EFF can apply to be a member of the EFA. And then, you know, we work with them. So, you know, we'll hear about something like Portland has done a ton on face recognition, for example, because of a really great local grassroots group. So, you know, we talk with them and, you know, and then maybe we can, like, if people see what happens in Portland, then we could be like, oh, can you talk to these people in, I mean, I'm picking cities out of a hat, right? But like Chicago or Chattanooga or, you know, Orlando or whatever. And so we, you know, when they bring something to our attention, we certainly, you know, pay attention. Like when those grassroots groups bring something to our attention at the city level, we try to pay attention. You know, we keep an eye on places like New York City and obviously all of the California cities because we're a California organization. That's where we're based. You know, I wish we had like the resources to like at least cover all the major metros or whatever, but
yeah, me too. You should be. And I think we talked about earlier, really well said about things being a drop in the bucket, but buckets get full with drops.
That's true.
And your Electronic Frontier Alliance is part of that, to me, that, you know, that drop being in a bucket, because this can, like Oregon can do this, and then it can be a example or framework for other cities to do it. Because like I said, how do you connect people together? And that's that grassroots. And one of the things I love about EFF, and you guys listen to this, and I'm going to send this up, but you have a really good podcast series out that the topics are so interesting. Things like Dr. Seuss warns us, and safer sex work makes a safer internet. And this one I loved, Losing Until We Win, Realistic Revolution in Science Fiction. And these are just such interesting ways to put privacy into perspective for the consumer, so you can take a big bite into that privacy apple. And I love this whole series, and I would encourage every single person to go. And there's really great podcast series. And you guys also have a lot on your website about transparency, innovation, free speech. It's just the amount of things you guys have here. It's like hopeful. It's like the bright light in the whole thing. I think you can sink your teeth into it through the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I think you're our superhero.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say.
You're a privacy superhero.
I mean, I think we do. It's so easy to kind of go like, oh, this is bad and this is bad and this is bad. Like we are really trying to frame like this is what the future could be. Like there's a lot of promise here, like, you know, this is what it could be, but we just have to like think about it. So I appreciate you.
Well, I really mean it. And you can tell, like, I can barely like temper myself to not write about these things, because there's so much personal advocacy, you know. So probably you did a better job back in your day tempering them, but I can feel myself coming through, I hate to say it, in some of the articles. But I thank you so much for coming on. And is there anything you want to leave us with? Any wise words, or other than me saying, everybody go to the Electronic Frontier Foundation? You can donate, right? We can donate and support the group.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. And like, so I'm going to tell everybody right now, I'm going to put all this in the notes, but you can donate and support. You can take action. If something's bothering you, maybe use the Electronic Frontier Foundation to find a way to connect with people, to see what other cities are doing, other local groups are doing. And is there anything you want to leave us with, or you don't have to leave us with anything, but I would love it.
Oh, I mean, I think you did a great job for EFF there. I don't have to do any of that. We do have an action center, so check it out to see if there's anything going on around you. And I mean, for me, I just I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't really think we could make change. I think it's very easy on privacy, especially, to become a nihilist and be like, whatever, my information's out there. But we can make change. They need recent information for it to be useful. So like, consumers actually have a lot more power in this situation than we think. It's just about changing the system. And I really think we're kind of in the middle of a story right now. And so I really encourage people to not give up hope, and to, look for ways where, you can lend your voice even a little bit to the cause.
I love that. I love that so much, because I think that makes me very hopeful. And I think if we stop thinking we can make change, we don't. That's great. You're right. There's Action Center, and you can also volunteer for the EFF. So I'm going to put all that in the notes. And Hayley, you've motivated me, and I hope you've motivated everybody else. And thank you for this time, for this podcast.
Oh, well, thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Tiny Little Victories with Hayley Tsukayama. I'm pretty stoked afterwards, and I just want to share with you a couple of things I'm going to put in the notes. If you are interested in working with the Electronic Frontier Foundation, they do have a lot of volunteer opportunities pretty much all over the place. So you can go to their website at eff.org /about/opportunities/volunteer. And you can see all of those. That's all under the Take Action button. They also have, and we talked about this in the podcast, Hayley and I talked about the Electronic Frontier Alliance, which is a grassroots network of community and campus organizations that are working to educate people about the importance of digital rights. And, I know you guys know this. I know it's out there, but the EFF makes it really easy to, one, get involved, and in your own city, in your own town, and two, to really be able to understand and wrap your head around all of the digital rights issues that really affect you as a person. And one of the themes of Electronic Frontier Foundation is that they believe that technology should support the intellectual freedom that's at the heart of a democratic society. And that includes a couple of things. And you go to the website and read about where you can find allies and free expression, security, privacy, creativity, and the access to knowledge. Curiosity should be rewarded, not stifled. And I think if you think about transparency and access to knowledge, it's really hard to find that today. I mean, where do you go to get the plans for your neighbor's house that's going to be, 10 months in renovation, and just because they posted a little note on the door? I mean, where is all that? How do you get access to that? How do things happening around you affect you in terms of culture, code, and the law? So please go check it out. It's really interesting. www.eff.org. I'll put it all in the notes, and see what you can learn. It's always good to learn something. So next week, we have Mark Grigette. He is the founder and CEO of New Eyes, and he is a Navy veteran who has created a piece of technology that gives better vision to people who have impaired vision. And I met him many years ago at Mobile World Congress America, actually, and was introduced by a good friend, Alexander Rojas, who will probably be on the show in the fall. He's a UFO expert. Very interesting fella. But Mark has just devoted his post-military time to working with devices that help people. And then he started New Eyes. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and what he's been doing. So come back next week for another episode of Tiny Little Victories.